Hello and welcome to the Post-Gazette show here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's YouTube page and our podcasting network. I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. We're your Steelers writers, and we're breaking things down after the Steelers just finished their first preseason game, winning 31-25. We're going to break down all the biggest insights that we can give you from this first action of the season right here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find this show on your podcasting app and on YouTube. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. They also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment's over? And who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar Snyder today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. Remember, they'll fight for your workers' compensation rights that you deserve, and there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, this seemed like a not so typical preseason game because I was expecting 1,000 penalties. And granted, there were some, but I felt like the biggest takeaway that I had from the Steelers, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and we'll start with just our offensive observations. I thought things ran pretty smoothly. And granted, you got Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson, two quarterbacks that have started in playoff games in their career, but I thought the passing offense moved the ball well. The offensive lines picked up the pass rush well. In general, I thought this was a nice, smooth intro of most of the backups playing for the Steelers.
Yeah, it was a pretty entertaining NFL exhibition, Chris, which is
right.
Really kind of all you can ask for, especially in that first one. You know, if you watched all the way till the end, and God bless you if you did. For us, it's our jobs, but bless your heart if you were tuned in for Logan Woodside, his little give up slide on the last offensive play. There could have been a lot of that in the Steelers preseason opener, and sometimes you do see that in early August football. But no, I mean, guys like Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson, who have been there, done that at the quarterback position, have played in postseason games, started them. The August moment was certainly small potatoes for them, and they made it look that way. They made the Jaguars defense look that way. And yes, for us, the viewers, or whether you're a reporter, media like us, or a fan, it made for a better night of football watching than we sometimes get this time of year.
Now, Brian, we could talk about the quarterbacks, and say, man, they were pretty efficient. Mason Rudolph, 9 of 10 for 84 and a touchdown. Skylar Thompson, 20 of 28 for 233 and 3 touchdowns, both with passer ratings in the 130s. But
traded
again,
the Saints for a first rounder.
Yeah, there you go. That's what they need to do. You know what? Forget all that. They are the starting quarterbacks. It's exactly how for the rest of the season. Forget Aaron Rodgers. Just put Mason Rudolph in the first quarter and then Skylar Thompson. But that's what we're not going to talk about that. I want to talk about guys that stood out on offense. I got to say, even though it was just for that one play, seeing Darnell Washington run that vertical of a route, catch it, and get into the end zone, that should be a sign that they need to get the ball to him more, like effectively, not just as like a gadget play and not just as the occasional thing. Like, use him as a legitimate threat because he can run those routes now. There was a time he couldn't. There was a time that it was, hey, run to the flat or just catch this short pass. But it looks like he is evolving as a threat, and I thought that touchdown was a good example of that.
Yeah, that was impressive. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that 3 or 4 times a drive or 4 or 5 times a game. But, certainly in small doses, I think Darnell can sort of deplete the old NBA Jam stamina bar and, empty the tank and go make a play like that. So, yeah, obviously once he does get his big body down there, he is a humongous target for a quarterback to hit. And, that was fun to watch. The goalpost dunk was fun to watch. I didn't realize that's still a penalty. I knew it was at one point. I thought they unbanned it, but whatever. It's preseason. It's preseason for the refs too, Chris. So but that was nice. I'll tell you another guy on offense who, and we've seen Darnell do that in camp. Now the people who aren't out at Latrobe watching in person or seeing the leaked clips through grainy film on social media can see it for themselves. Even though it was only 2 catches for 24 yards, I thought Roman Wilson came out and made a statement.
You are right. Yes.
Because it was early in that game. And I don't know if it was a concerted effort to go to him early and get that confidence going, or if he just got open and he was the first read and boom, it clicked. But, it's funny. Much like me, I'm sure you get asked that's one of the biggest questions or most common questions you get asked by people is, what are we going to get out of Roman Wilson this year from Steelers fans? And, I sort of tell people, like, I haven't really felt him a ton in training camp. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have a dominant presence about him on the field or anything like that. But hey, he came out like gangbusters tonight in this preseason opportunity, which was a huge opportunity for him with how much time he missed last year.
It is, and I was encouraged by that. He got open, made a good catch, got up.
He looked the part.
He's doing his job, and that's what you ask of him. And the fact that they didn't feel like they needed to leave him in for too long, I thought was a good sign. Roman Wilson, definitely impressed with him. I'll also say I was impressed with the composition of the offensive line. I didn't get a chance to study it too closely on anyone in particular, but especially the first team offensive line, when they ran on short yardage, they were able to move guys to create space to run the ball. When it was time to protect Mason Rudolph, they did give up that one sack, but I felt like that was more of a coverage sack because Mason just kept holding on to the football.
Yeah, I thought that was on Rudolph. He's got to climb the pocket there or get rid of it or something. Yeah, you can't protect forever.
But outside of that, and Trey Faltano's one penalty, they look like, and again, as Aaron Rodgers pointed out, teams aren't throwing the kitchen sink at you in the preseason. You're getting very bland looks, but there were bland looks last year that Broderick Jones couldn't block, and he looked like he was doing his job in this one. I thought as a whole, they had hat on a hat. They were holding up the pocket, giving Mason Rudolph time. It doesn't mean that they're going to do it all season, but points to them for doing it in their first test run against another team in an exhibition. I think that, again, the smooth sailingness of the offense is what really piqued my interest as far as that side of the ball, that they looked coordinated, they looked on point, they didn't look haphazard. I think all of that is encouraging for things moving forward. Doesn't mean things are going to be great, doesn't mean that's how it's going to be all year, but at least that's an encouraging sign for the first step here.
Yeah, I'd certainly say the jury is still out on the offensive tackles in Broderick Jones and Troy Faltanu. I don't think they were particularly encouraging or particularly discouraging tonight, but like you said, relatively small sample size. I think it was better that you didn't notice them a ton rather than some of the previous preseason performances we've seen from Steelers offensive linemen, particularly on the edge. I can think of Dan Moore early in his career and even sometimes later in his career, or Kendrick Green on the interior when it looked like he was just getting overwhelmed in some of these preseason games, and even Troy Faltanu last year in the opener against the Texans. So yeah, the fact that we aren't seeing anything glaring from those guys is maybe a win in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing here. You didn't want to see anyone really looking too bad. I thought the one thing that you wanted to see more of on the offense was a little more Caleb Johnson making some plays.
Yeah.
He had 8 carries for 20 yards. His longest was a 7-yard trot. If Najee Harris did that, they'd be all over him. But again, rookie first preseason game. I thought there were that 7-yard run was a good one. But I'm not gonna ding Caleb Johnson for that. I thought the biggest thing was what we saw in camp was, he's not as sure-handed as some of the other backs on the team. He had a pretty bad drop, but again, that's not what they're bringing him in for. So I think the one thing you could say there is the first team run game wasn't efficient, but they're testing out a lot of different things. If that's your only hang up on the offense, I say it's a good night.
Yeah, I'd say Caleb Johnson looked a little bit like a rookie. He left some out there for sure. When you get drafted in the 3rd round and you have that physique, you kind of need to be your own blocker, at least make that first guy miss and, get some extra yardage from there, which he did a couple times, but didn't do it as consistently as I'm sure he or the Steelers would like. And he played into the second half, which that in and of itself is maybe one of those low-key signs that, okay, they weren't completely satisfied with what they saw from him in the first 2 quarters.
Agreed. So
receivers were balling out, though, in general.
They were.
I mean, and we've seen that in camp. I tweeted this as well. Receivers probably the deepest position across the NFL because of how many good ones come in every year. But, for a receiving core that gets ragged on a lot by the fan base, and, I get it, there aren't that many big names outside of DK Metcalf. These guys are making plays in camp. You're not seeing a ton of drops. You're not seeing dudes fall down in the middle of the field after running their route. So guys are making the routine plays routinely, and even some really good ones like the undrafted free agent Keyshawn Williams on that touchdown ball late in the game.
Yeah, Keyshawn Williams, 55 yards and a touchdown. Scotty Miller, four of four catches on 4 targets for 47, just getting open. Rock Taylor caught 2 of 3 targets for 38 yards. Max Hurlman with that touchdown ran a pretty sharp route.
Yeah, you can't he'll beat you to the flat. All right. He's good at that. Robert Woods is someone who, I don't necessarily love doing the whole winners and losers thing of preseason, but he's someone who I think, he might be falling down the ladder a little bit as these other guys.
These younger guys look good. Yeah. I agreed there. We haven't talked any defense. That'll be coming next. We'll be doing that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from Chris Carter and Brian Batko. Stick with just because we got a lot to discuss on the Steelers preseason opener as they won over the Jaguars. Welcome back to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's your post-game show after the Steelers' victory in their preseason opener over the Jacksonville Jaguars. As always, this show is brought to Edgar Snyder Associates, but it's also brought to you by Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. That's Goldberg, Persky, and White. Brian, we talked about the offense. Let's talk about the defense.
Although one last thing on the offense, Chris.
Okay.
We did a quick little fantasy draft via text, right up to kickoff. And then even once the game started, because the defense was on the field first, obviously we kept it to the offense. And I had Skylar Thompson and a couple of Keyshawn Williams, Max Hurlman. So I didn't add up the points, but I think I edged you out.
I think you won. Yeah,
if you're like us and you're a sicko that wants to do preseason fantasy, you can do that on FanDuel. You can actually set your fantasy lineups. So maybe I'll tally it up by the end of the night, put it out there on the old social medias, and let people see our teams.
God bless you. I do not have the wherewithal to tally up preseason fantasy points.
CBS Sports app has it, which is nice, so I can just look at the points there. But
that is helpful. But anyways, let's talk about the defense because I thought the defense, granted, you're gonna look at the final scoreboard and say, "Oh, 25 points, that's a lot allowed." But they forced the Jaguars to only convert 3 of their 10 third downs on the night. When the first
he kicked a 70-yard field goal.
That is insane. Let's just talk about that for a sec. When they lined up for that, I was like, okay, fine. When that thing was going, I was like, he's got that easily. And then he probably could have made that from 73 or 74 with the way that went over the goalpost. I ain't never seen something like that.
I was at my cousin Jake's house for the first half for his kids' birthday parties, and so by the end of the first half of the preseason game, I'm keeping one eye on it and getting some more chips. And when I even saw him lining up for it, I was like, wait, they're not close enough for a field. Basically, in my mind, I was like, did they throw a 20-yard pass that I missed? And then I'm, again, half paying attention to the kick itself. And then when I saw the dude jumping like he just won the Super Bowl, that's when I realized, I was like, oh, I didn't miss anything. He just blasted that thing from across midfield. So, props to Cam Little. If we're doing winners and losers, big loser from this game, Chris, is the Steelers' field goal defense. Come on, man. How you letting a 70-yarder get put on your head?
Well, that's the thing here is that they didn't allow a touchdown in the first half. I thought one thing I noticed, and again, I didn't think anyone really stood out too much on defense as far as playmaking. I thought Beanie Bishop, they went after him a bunch. There was one play where he broke it up where it was a bad pass, and if they throw that any better, it's probably a big play. But again, you take advantage of the plays that are there. But he made 5 tackles, had a few breakups. I thought he was solid. But the thing I was impressed with, similar to the offense, I was impressed with the flow of the defense when they were switching their coverages. There were a couple plays where they tried to go at Cole Holcomb and they tried to catch him in a motion, and he was in position, made a good tackle, or even was just in coverage at the right spot to force an incomplete pass. Overall, the defense, I thought, had a good test run themselves of things, and the defense, as much as the offense was missing with no Aaron Rodgers and no DK Metcalf or Pat Freiermuth or Johnny Smith or any of those guys, the defense, they didn't even have Nick Herbig out there. Not only they're missing their top 3 edge guys, no Cam Hayward, none of their top 3 corners. And Deshaun Elliott was sitting out. Juan Thornhill also, when he made a big hit early on. I was just impressed by, like, hey, they looked like they were coordinated. They didn't take this game off. They weren't just like, oh, this doesn't matter. Looked like they came out and they were pretty solid.
Yeah, Beanie Bishop, he was active for sure. There was one play I had my eyes trained on him because he was covering Travis Hunter in the slot, and he carried Hunter down the seam and then got to where he needed to go, I think, to make a tackle on the outside receiver. I mean, he led the Steelers with 5 tackles tonight, so I think that was the case on that play. Yeah, there was one, too, where a guy dropped the ball right in front of him, and, then it goes down as, hey, no completion given up on you. So, yeah, but by and large, I mean, I think he was doing his job, which is nice to see. Derrick Harmon, a couple times I kind of focused on him specifically. I thought he got some good interior push. Y.A. Black is humongous individual. He's got like the RoboCop thing on his right arm too. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't remember seeing that at St. Vincent, but you can't miss him when he's on the screen. Even Jack Sawyer popped up a little bit there. He was in there till the very end and got a nice rush from the left side. Couldn't finish the play, so I'm sure he'll be kicking himself for that. But, that was one time we saw the rookie from Ohio State on defense. So, yeah, that's some good stuff. James Pierre, I think, not maybe a night to forget for him a little bit.
But touchdown.
Yeah, but we know he's not going to be in the mix once the quote-unquote 3-headed monster is out there at corner. And, yeah, I mean, hey, he started off the game with a bang, one Thornhill. Big old hit from him. I'm sure he had some Yinzers out there saying, Minka who? We don't need 39. We've got 22.
I thought it was that was a good moment for him. I also think points for Payton Wilson because he was the green dot and everyone seemed to be on point. And the green dot is the guy that's hearing the calls and relaying the first steps of it to everyone on the defense. Guys seemed like they understood. Guys seemed like they were playing fast. I thought that was a good point. I'll also say Brandon Eccles, who, I think he had that really nice breakup where he was playing low in the zone, backed up, and then tipped the ball. Really, really solid play on his part there. And I feel like him and Beanie Bishop, there's extra pressure on these guys to make sure that they do stand out and show that, hey, I can be the good 4th or 5th or 6th cornerback that comes into the game because the Steelers are so stacked at cornerback. But Eccles, I think, has made himself the top option for if someone gets hurt in that big 3 that they have at cornerback, he's going to be the first guy in there.
Yeah, I like to call him PDF because he's always attached to receivers when we see him out there at practice. So PDF.
Oh, I understand now. Okay.
Sometimes a little too much. They had him wearing those oven mitts on Thursday.
He did. That was funny.
To prevent from holding, but no, he is sticky in coverage in all seriousness. And, you kind of like the quarterbacks that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you should expect to see that from a 5th-year vet who's started and played in regular season games when he's out there in the preseason. But yeah, take nothing away from Eccles. He has clearly cemented himself as the top backup, partly due to, James Pierre is not at his level, I don't think, as a player. And Corey Trice is unfortunately injured again and can't get on the field. So I guess one last thing, these guys aren't necessarily defense, but I consider them part of that effort. The punting battle has begun in earnest here in August. Cam Johnston wasn't bad, but Corliss Waitman boomed one.
57-yarder.
57, the kind of field flipping we saw from him all last season when Johnston was out. So I think this is a real thing to monitor and watch the rest of camp because, for Johnston, it's going to be as much about getting back in the swing of things after that horrific leg injury and also probably the consistency to keep it going as he tries to, continue to recover and rehab from that and get back to 100%.
Certainly. And it's been a legit competition. Watching these two guys go at it in the punting game is kind of interesting. I do wonder how that'll play out and if they're able to swing one of these guys for like a pick swap or something sometime down the line. If someone just really needs a punter and they can send off one of them,
Cam Johnston and Skylar Thompson for a first-round pick to the right team. Maybe throw in Rock Taylor. Now we're talking. And Lou Nichols round it out.
Just a reminder, and us saying all this, the reason why you're seeing us be so chill and be kind of just going back and forth about this is that it's the preseason. This isn't going to determine anything. I always tell people 2 years ago when Kenny Pickett led touchdown drives every time that he was on the field in preseason, there was this belief out here, hey, they're going to figure it out. and they get utterly stomped by the 49ers in the first week of the season, and their offense.
That's because the 49ers practiced at Shaler High School a couple days before that game. All right. It was like the Monstars situation. They took all the Titans talent for that game.
Totally. But preseason is still important to log the progress of people, where certain battles are. We'll continue to log that as the Steelers return to camp for their first practice after the preseason game. Monday, we will have a North Shore Drive episode up, getting ready for that. Brian, thanks for joining me here on the post-game show on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you all for joining us here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. We're your Steelers writers. A reminder, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like to see if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.